thank you. Okay, so for those of you who have not heard of Premise, we're a research technology company, and we crowdsource data from smartphone users around the world. So Premise is leveraging two global trends, the mass adoption of the smartphone, and secondly, the need for on-the-ground, in-the-moment information. Now, smartphones can be purchased for as low as $15, and latest estimates is there are over 3.8 billion users around the world, all of whom have got built-in GPS and cameras to capture data around them. So over the next 20 minutes or so, Becca and I will be illustrating two key points for you. Firstly, how mobile technology can be used to capture this ground level data in near real time. And secondly, how you'll be able to gain information into two costly areas of the supply chain. Simply put, the first mile and the last mile. So just I'll explain a little bit more just about Premise and bring that to life a little bit. So we've created what we call is a global task marketplace. So this is where we've got contributors who are the people who've downloaded our app, and we reward them for sharing their opinions, their experiences, and crucially, the information from their location. All of this is through the Premise app. So we have tasks, and they include surveys to gather attitudes and sentiment, but we also have more advanced tasks, including locating and discovering new information. And some of our contributors have become experienced enough to be doing face-to-face interviews as well. So if you think about the contributors that we've got, they can be representative of a particular socio-demographic group, or they can be seen as an extended workforce out there in the field collecting information. Now, in this respect, we have been dubbed the Uber of the research world because we're tapping into a global workforce which has valuable information around them, about themselves and from the world around them. Now, just looking at the right-hand side of the slide here, for customers such as yourselves, you can gain those insights into attitudes and perceptions and sentiment as you would do through traditional surveys. But you can overlay this with images, we can do screenshots from what people are seeing on their mobiles, and we can also overlay points of interest data to provide a fuller understanding of human behavior and the underlying drivers. So if you'd like to look at the app, then afterwards, just go to your App Store or Google Play and search for Premise. You can download that and have a look. Okay, so just moving on just a little bit just around our credentials, just to put everything into perspective. So we've currently got over 2.7 million contributors, and they are in 117 countries, and we support 37 different languages. Through a lot of our work with government and international development, we're particularly strong in low to middle income countries where information has been traditionally more costly or underrepresented through online panels. But as you can see from the blue areas, dark blue areas, we've got good coverage in key markets such as North America, Europe, and the emerging BRIC economies. So we get some amazing images from around the world. If you wanted to see these all, you can move my face around to see them. But just to give you a flavor of the sorts of things that we see on a daily basis. So working around the slide clockwise, top left, this is a water tower in Burkina Faso. Moving to the right, we've got images there of actually from Disneyland in Shanghai. And this is where social distancing is influencing their ride on the roller coaster there. Looking at the right, we've got produce that's for sale in Nigeria. And the bottom right, if you can squint and see that, that's a cattle market in Ethiopia. Just moving to the middle, that's an indoor market in Turkey. And the picture I really like, and I'd love to be able to blow it up, is the family dinner in Iraq. So this is just examples of things that people are taking as part of some of the projects that we've been doing. So I thought it'd be quite good to look at a topical case study. Now, I know we've got US and UK people, as well as other people around the world, but hopefully you'll recognize some of these. So I'm not sure if you'll get the connection, but there's something in common between these four. So we've got Facebook, we've got a UK government department, we've got one of the leading schools of hygiene and tropical medicine, and we've also got the G7 there with two of the prime ministers, our prime minister and the president. So what have they all got in common? Well, they are all concerned with misinformation that is causing vaccine hesitancy, something that's affecting us all around the world. So this all started last year when Facebook, as part of its mission to tackle misinformation, awarded a project to the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. They teamed up with the UK government, who was keen to understand how social media was influencing vaccine hesitancy. So this is some of our output. So Premise was chosen to reach out to its network of contributors, solely in the UK, but actually using many languages that we know are spoken. In London, there's up to 100 different languages spoken. So we were asking contributors open questions around the barriers to vaccination and those sources of influence. And what we were looking for is them to upload screenshots that they'd seen, often through private social media or closed platforms such as WhatsApp. And much of this information was then taken and it was used by the government to create a counter narrative aimed at the different socio-demographic groups that we were seeing. So you might ask, what has the G7 got to do with this? Well, the research and analysis was taken and discussed at the G7 last week, which was hosted in the UK. Okay, so I'll hand over to my colleague Becca, who's got a couple more examples to show you.
Great, thanks Sam for the introduction. So I'm going to be going over 2 additional case studies that we'd like to illustrate for you guys. So for this engagement, the client specifically was interested in gaining visibility into the first mile supply chain of the palm fruit in Indonesia. So they wanted to use this to inform policies in their sustainable agriculture division. And crops like palm fruit can be harvested from lots of different farms, lots of different plantations of varying sizes before reaching the mill, making original sourcing of the fruit really difficult to pin down. So here the client was interested in discovering locations for palm fruit collection points, so where they actually go from the farmers to the mill, and these are colloquially called ramps. Again, to better understand how raw materials, how this fruit really travels from tree to mill. So they came to us, and through the Premise platform, we were able to prompt contributors to identify such collection points in 10 different areas of northern Sumatra, which is, of course, an island part of Indonesia. So essentially what we enabled ordinary citizens to do with this engagement was to conduct field research in the communities where they live and earn money for it on the side as part of our gig economy model. And this also allowed the client to avoid contracting and training outside professionals or interviewers, especially in terms of COVID. You can imagine that it was much better to employ locals than to have outside research analysts travel to the country. So as you can imagine, there was a really large interpretive element for this data collection. Since locals were really discovering these locations from the ground up, they weren't given a map. We basically said, look at these different areas and see if there's any of these collection points there. So there was a lot of learning and iterating in terms of understanding which locations actually qualified as palm fruit collection points, versus other collection points that were too small of operations to be considered. Because they weren't actually sending this fruit to the mill, but using it for their own processing or production purposes. So through sort of iterative task design and contextual clues in terms of telling our contributors what to look for on the ground, in this case specifically, the presence of weighing devices or fruit spears, which are outlined in the red boxes in the photos here on the slide, contributors started to correctly map these locations. And then once a contributor actually found a ramp and identified it as such, we asked them through the Premise app to categorize the type of ramp based on a corporate taxonomy that our client had given us. So was this a commercial location? Was this a capitalized location? As well as to take several different photos of the collection area so that we could really paint a picture on the ground of what these look like. So in addition to doing that, we actually asked our contributors in this case to act as interviewers by asking the proprietors of these locations if the ramp had a name, how much they were currently charging for the palm fruit, the days and hours that the fruit would get picked up, and more importantly, even how would these get picked up? Were they transported away with motorbikes, with large trucks, with wheelbarrows? So really, again, trying to find an understanding of the operating picture on the ground. So despite access limitations and very low mobile phone and internet penetration in this particular area of Sumatra, in about 4 months, our premise contributors actually mapped over 6,000 palm collection points across the island. So using these premise captured photos, the location data that they were able to record directly in the cell phone of the location that they identified, as well as the interview responses, the client was able to aggregate all of that data into a directory on the first mile of palm fruit. And this will allow them to become more transparent as well as more data-driven in their commitment to creating sustainable supply chains for their products. And in this case, of course, with palm fruit, the particular focus was on eliminating deforestation due to palm fruit harvesting. So in that way, they can really use this on-the-ground data to fulfill their obligations to their corporate sustainable development goals. Okay, last case study from our example, and this is moving away from first mile traceability towards last mile implementation. For this next engagement, we actually did with a large international beverage company, and this wasn't done in Indonesia, but halfway across the world in Brazil. And here specifically, we were focused on providing on-the-ground insights into the brand's in-store operational implementation and also shopper insights, focusing specifically on 13 different states in the country. And essentially, the problem here was that the client was experiencing what I think is a very common problem in the CPG world, which was that they had very little data and very little visibility into the products in their stores, and in the stores that they were selling their products, and what their products looked like on the shelf due to fragmented distribution chains, especially in an emerging market like Brazil, which was thousands and thousands of miles away from their corporate headquarters. So this data gathering required our contributors to go to predetermined stores, so meaning we gave them particular addresses to visit in the app that will show. So again, very different than our previous example where it was more of an open discovery task. And to go to these particular stores to capture photos and to collect both quantitative and qualitative data on a variety of questions. So questions such as, were their products fresh and safe for consumption? So that is, could they identify expired products on the shelf? Were products favorably located on the shelf and in stores? Were they adhering to the planogram? Were they at the desired eye level, or were they way above the head or way below? As well as what sorts of promotional material was there on the brand? And more importantly, how about their competitors? How did they stack up? So really, what was the ground looking like for them? So given these questions, we contributors provided observations on measurable indicators. So, again, was a specific SKU available at that store? Counting the number of facings on the product had on the shelf, and also noting the expiration date, of course, because they were interested in the freshness of the product. But also, our contributors there in this example provided much harder to capture more qualitative elements, such as opinions on the product and shelf placement, how much of the shelf space the brand took up, as well as in the moment reactions to promotional material on the SKU that they were asked to find. And I think this is where the crowdsourcing element of premises data gathering is, again, really important to point out. So for a lot of the factors I mentioned, I think opinions on in-store execution, in the moment reactions to promotional material, would this be effective? Is this effective for the consumer? There's no single source of truth, right? There's just personal judgments or thoughts. And since our contributors are, regular locals living in the targeted area and not retail audit or brand experts, they can provide honest insight into the customer and shopper in-store experience. So again, this is what allows our clients to have local eyes and ears on the ground and keep a pulse on how individuals are interacting, are reacting with their products in near real time through the smartphone app that we've developed. And being able to collect this type of semi-structured data in terms of open text responses, sentiments, photos, allows us to answer questions, to kind of gather data on the more elusive types of questions for the shopper and consumer experience, and is therefore a really unique value add, I think. So in addition to uncovering these qualitative insights that I just mentioned and that we were able to aggregate for the client, we also discovered some harder kind of quantitative facts and saw actually that about 15% of the products that our contributors audited on the shelf were indeed expired. And that in 5% of cases, the beverage was not found at all in the store. And of course, these findings had serious implications not only for their brand image in Brazil and deficiencies in the quality of their product, but also revealed gaps in their revenue, in their distribution chains, especially because the majority of these expired and missing products were actually concentrated in one particular state in Brazil out of the 13 that we had contributors visit, which they, again, were able to course correct with the data that we provided them. So that was a really quick overview on how the Premise platform, can crowdsource data in 3 pretty distinct ways. The ways in which we can engage, I think, pretty hard to reach populations, hard to reach areas of the world for both qualitative and quantitative research. And would love to kind of open the floor for discussion, to go into Q&A, but here you also have our email addresses. So mine and Sam's, and just to note, we're also going to be in the networking session right after this. And I think with that, we can go ahead and open the session up to any questions you may have. I've seen a couple of them come in the chat as well.
Fantastic. Yes, great. Thank you, Rebecca and Sam. Maybe I know, Sam, you responded to some of this already, but I think maybe let's go back to the question that Paul was asking. Have you had any success with professional audiences like attorneys or consultants? And maybe talk a little bit more elaborate about, because you've showed us a number of case studies, maybe talk a little bit about the sectors, or if there's any sectors that you're focusing on specifically.
Yeah, that's great. So, I mean, we do have more success with the general population, and we use them to sometimes get hard to reach information. So things that you wouldn't necessarily be able to get through social listening or web scraping or things like that. So hard to reach information is where we do quite well. When you talk about hard to reach people, it's not impossible. What we normally do there is a very targeted campaign, either a particular group or personas. So it's not impossible, but the majority of our work, it tends to be with normal consumers and shoppers. I saw another question just further down there about how do we deal with incomplete, inaccurate data. So there's a couple of ways we do that. One is kind of before we set up any of the tasks, we're looking for certain things. So we're looking for information that's going to be a certain text, or we're looking for images that are not blurred. And we also use some machine learning, which will look for other things within the image that we're expecting. So if we're looking for ATMs, we would expect to see ATM, or we expect to see something that resembles other ATMs that we're looking at. So that stops a lot of the information coming in. We then run further QC on the data to make sure that actually we're getting rid of any outliers, or we're getting rid of people maybe who've just gone through a survey very quickly. But that's obviously quite standard that you would expect across a research platform.
Sam, just to quickly add on that, I think, one of the things that our clients actually use us for is to, deal with their incomplete or inaccurate data. So we do tons of things around verifying places of interest. So does this health facility actually exist in this Kinshasa province, or is there, still a bank at this particular latitude and longitude in Davao in the Philippines? So I think kind of proving the negative is also a really valuable application here, which is, of course, a little bit harder to do in some circumstances to really make sure that this facility isn't available or has closed down or has changed names or something. So I think that's another application right there.
Yeah, and just on that point, the other thing we do is often, because the crowdsourcing element of it, we often get the same location taken. People discover the same location, and we have a harmonization that looks at that, compares images, compares GPS location, and then we make that a single point. So that's where the crowdsourcing element comes in, but we're actually able to harmonize that into a single point, a single data point. There was another question around, are the contributors trained or directed to look for specific things on the ground? So, well, we have, yeah, and it's actually an interesting question because we have two types. We have one where we want them to go and locate something specifically. So go in store and find this product, or go into your neighborhood and find certain facilities and amenities. There's other ones we have where we would like people to explore. So we would say, you know, go out and tell us, are there schools in your area? Are there billboards that you can see? What billboards are you seeing? So we would ask them to look for certain things, but to avoid biasing, we would obviously just get them to explore more openly. Okay. Any other? I'm just scrolling through. Any other questions?
I think you've picked up most of them that I saw in the chat now. Okay, there's one. Are you countries where you're not present?
Yeah, so I mean, there are a few very obvious ones that are currently off limits. Libya, North Korea. So they tend to be the countries where there would be less research anyway. One country that we've recently launched in is Russia, and we've also we are just trialing China as a country as well. So so most of the countries you could think of, we're in. But I mentioned China because obviously that's, you know, it's such a big economy, and that's something that we will be launching later this year.
And I think other than the kind of off-limit countries that Sam just mentioned, it is also worth noting that if we aren't present in a particular country that you'd be interested in for data collection, we have the ability to ramp up new networks in about 30 days. So it requires, you know, us to localize our app in the applicable language and to push tasks to those areas. But again, that doesn't take us more than a couple of weeks, and we can always grow our network, you know, in certain areas, whether that be new countries or even, you know, new regions in a particular country, due to the fact that we are a mobile application and could just expand our contributor base as needed.
Great. Follow-up question on that. Can you use this for general surveys, or does it always have to be photos and stuff?
Yeah, so yeah, good. So I mean, we have survey software built in, and we can just do standard surveys, whether it's gathering sentiment, attitudes, drivers, that type of stuff. So we can do that, and then the contributors, we can get responses about them, how representative they are of their population, but we can also use them just to go out and gather information. So if we were doing mystery shopping, or if we were looking for certain, you know, as I say, you know, certain issues within a store or something like that, then you could use them, and it's more around the quality of data rather than them as a person. Someone said, can we build an ongoing panel in the country? So so the short answer is yes. We have a general, what we call like a public network, which is where these are contributors that feed into all elements of our research. Sometimes we do set up what's called a private network. So that would maybe be a very specific panel that we would set up. So if that's what you're asking, then we could set that up. But generally, we have very good. We have people who are contributing on an ongoing basis, so we can go back to those people and we can ask information. So we can do longitudinal studies of people. So hopefully that answers the question.
Great. Yeah, sounds like it did. Oh, there we go. Would it be helpful to have contributions from Mexico?
Contributions from Mexico in what, is it, what questions or I'm not sure if I understand the question actually.
If it's in terms of becoming a contributor in Mexico, we would definitely love to have you on the app and to contribute there.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, if you want to download it, it's or if you've got friends and family that just want to earn a bit of extra money, then by all means download that. Random question: have you done any projects involving dogs or dog food? Becca, have we done stuff around dogs and dog food? I know that people like to take pictures of their dogs during lockdown and then their home office friends and stuff like that. We've had a lot of that type of thing, but I don't know if we've done any projects with dogs.
I think with dog food specifically, it's definitely been one of the things that we've done retail audits around. So going out and finding, new products that our customers have found in their point of sale data, and then, taking a look at that product and taking photos so that they can actually apply computer vision to it to have it in their catalog. So we've done sort of the dog angle from a CPG perspective, but not in terms of any directly involving dogs.
Yeah.
All right, so no dogs were harmed in the production of this presentation. I have a question about so the panels and the longevity. What do you do to keep your respondents on board and also validate them?
So how do we keep them on board? Well, we do have, as well as specific projects, we do have general data collection. So we're doing a global study around the impact of COVID. We ask about all their habits. So we build up background data that is just stuff that we can learn more about them, but actually can be accessible to people as well. So we collect that. Just around how we kind of validate, then yeah, it is down to the kind of the QC that there's a certain time that we would expect them to complete a survey, or there's a certain quality of image, and so, but people are off while they're in the app. It will tell them that picture is not suitable, and then they can take it there. So it's not as it's rejected back afterwards. Some of it is, but we can actually make sure that they complete it properly while they're there. There's just another question while we've got another minute, just around how contributors are rewarded. Yeah, so we have about 50 different payment methods around the world. Some is just standard kind of PayPal, others is Bitcoin. Some of it's actually in return for airtime. So in other words, because they're using their mobile and data, we actually give them airtime. We do have a facility where you can actually do the task offline, and when you come back and connect with Wi-Fi, it works. But actually, we find that is a payment mechanism as well.
Great, fantastic. And I think that brings us pretty much to the end. So Rebecca, Sam, thank you very much. Promise you guys are around for tomorrow as well. You're around for the networking. You have your virtual booth. So anybody wants to follow with Rebecca, Sam, and the team, stop by the virtual booth or grab them now in the networking session. And with that, I would say, again, Rebecca, Sam, thank you very much. And there's one last question. What about pro bono contribution from colleagues in Mexico just to cooperate?
Well, put on the spot. What about a pro bono collaboration? Yes, I think so. Yes. Well, I'll follow, Patricia. I'll follow up with you on that.
Exactly. Maybe a good one to continue in the networking. So
yeah. Again,
thank you very much. See you on the other side in the networking, and obviously for another full day of presentations tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.